Parenting is, of course, a constant journey of discovery, including sometimes things that neither parent nor child is prepared for. That was the case for author Michelle Alfano, whose teenage daughter revealed at age 16 that she wanted to transition to male. It's all chronicled in her book, The Unfinished Dollhouse, a memoir of gender and identity, and we welcome Michelle Alfano to our studio to find out more. Good of you to join us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Let's start from today and work backwards, shall we? Tell us about your child.
Frankie is now 20. He is enrolled part-time in university. He works part-time. We share a home together. He has his own unit within our home. He pays his rent. He does his own laundry. He has a partner. He has a very active social life. He volunteers. He's a pretty happy kid.
A going concern.
That and a pretty happy kid.
That and more. You said he very easily there. How long did it take you to do that?
That took a long time. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had a lot of conflict about me not being able to. He called me on it. He said, "You don't use my pronouns. You don't say son. You don't say boy, and that's a problem."
Well, in fairness to you, you had been saying she and my daughter for 19 years, I guess, right?
For 16 years.
16 years, sorry.
Yes.
16 years.
Yes.
So yeah. That's a habit that's a bit tough to break.
Well, but I think when someone explicitly asks you to honor their pronouns, if you're not honoring their pronouns, it's like you're saying, I don't see you, I don't acknowledge what you're telling me. That's a huge problem for people in the trans community. It's huge.
But you got there.
I did get there, yeah. And so did most of my family.
Let's just interrupt our conversation long enough to show a clip from a BBC documentary. This is called Transgender Kids, Who Knows Best? We'll play a little snippet of this and then come back and chat, okay? Sheldon, roll the clip, please.
When you're working with someone who's trans and they've begun to access whatever kind of treatment is right for them, you see these dramatic, like people just blossom. It's gorgeous. It's lovely to watch.
Herschel Russell is a transgender psychotherapist and activist in Toronto. He's an advocate for the gender affirmative approach, the idea that parents should support and encourage children who say their gender is out of sync with their body.
A mother of a gender diverse kid asked her 8-year-old, so how come you know that you're really a boy? And the child said, I know way down deep where the music plays. And I think that's so precise. It's non-rational, it's profound, it's beautiful, it's deep. That's how we know what gender we are. And very young children know that.
Picking up on that rather lovely metaphor, at what age did Frankie begin to know what the music was playing down deep?
Well, I don't think Frankie's story is a traditional coming out story. For him, I would say it was around 11 or 12 when he hit puberty. And that's probably because we weren't forcing anything on him as a child or as a toddler. He wasn't compelled to do anything that was specific to the female gender. But when he hit puberty, a lot of things started kicking in. Your body is changing. You see the girls around you are changing and behaving in a manner that would be described as feminine or female-oriented. And I think it just didn't sit well with him. I think this is when he became aware. At
what point did he come to either you or your husband and say, something about this feels wrong and I need to talk to you about it?
When he came out to me, he was 16, and he thought that I knew, or he was hoping that I knew, and we had a conversation where he said, you know, I need to tell you something, and I said, okay, you know, I'm wearing a binder. No, I didn't know that. You know what I'm going to say? I said, no, I don't know what you're going to say.
You really had no inkling of any of this?
No. My perception was that I'm going to use the female pronouns because before he came out, that she was gay. And we're like, okay, we're coping with that. But it was, no, I'm trans. I didn't know, my husband didn't know, and a couple of days later, we told my husband together.
The two of you, so he came to you first?
He came to me first.
Why do you think?
That's hard to say. Maybe he thought I'd be more sympathetic. I don't think that's accurate, but I think he might have thought I'd be more sympathetic.
And were you?
I was, my mind was blown. I had no idea at all. I didn't know anything about the trans community. I didn't know anything about being trans. I was completely unprepared, completely.
And how about when he told his father?
He was great. He was kind and gentle and understanding, and we were just like, okay, let's build an emotional moat around this kid and help him through it.
There were, see, I mean, in hindsight, everything becomes a lot more clear, but he was going through periods of depression and illness and so on in the past. What did you think that was about at the time?
I didn't know that he had had a breakup. He was dating, I say that in quotation marks, with a boy. The boy dumped him. So Frankie fell into a severe depression and then started to stop going to school and had stomach ailments and headaches, and his chest hurt and his foot hurt. And they were just like this confluence of terrible ailments with no, we couldn't determine what the source of the illness was.
Did you assume it was related to the breakup?
I thought it was, but I really didn't know. And then I kind of bullied him into telling me that he was gay because we came across some correspondence that suggested that he had a relationship with another girl, and he said yes, but I think he just wanted to say yes so that I maybe wouldn't probe any further. And then when he came out at 16, the symptoms started to alleviate themselves. Things, I wouldn't say it was a transformation right away, but he started to change. He was healthier and happier psychologically and physically. Things became better.
So I guess in hindsight, you infer that his body was screaming out to be...
Oh, absolutely. I have no question about that, because sometimes people will say, well, what's the hard science behind this? How do you know that he's trans? What's the proof that he's trans? Well, all I can tell you is that this child was extremely ill, had terrible ailments, was extremely repressed about his situation, and when that changed, his physical situation changed. He changed psychologically and physically.
Once you've had your family conference and everybody knows everything, what are the first steps you take?
Well, Frankie had a laundry list of things that he wanted to do.
What was on that list?
Right away. Name change, advise the school. He wanted to be able to go into a men's bathroom because he no longer felt comfortable in a women's bathroom.
Let me just pause there.
Sure.
When you put that to the school, I presume, that he wanted to use the men's bathroom?
That wasn't an issue. The trans issue was not a problem with the school. He was in a very liberal school. It was more a question of dealing with his depression. They were inadequate in dealing with his depression. I don't know if the schools are overwhelmed with kids that have emotional and psychological situations, but in terms of his depression, they weren't a great help. It was just, apply tough love, get this kid up, get her to school. Maybe the implication was you're being too soft on her. Just get her to school, get her to finish the school year. But as soon as we said, listen, this is, he's trans, extremely accommodating.
Extremely accommodating because this is actually, it's not 1 in a billion anymore, is it? It's not as rare as it once was. They maybe have more experience dealing with this now. People
are definitely more aware. He's in a liberal school. They also have a zero tolerance about bullying of any kind. And I can honestly say that he never met with any kind of aggressiveness or bullying at school, at his high school, at all that I'm aware of.
As he transitioned, Tell us, give us some more of the details about what was involved in all of that.
Well, several stages, right? It's notifying people, and we sort of did it in concentric circles of closeness. It's allowing him to dress the way that he wants, to change his physical appearance, to change his pronouns. It's a slow evolution. I think part of my anxiety is that I tried to slow walk him through this, which is not the right word exactly, but I didn't want him to go as quickly as he wanted to go, because he was raring to go by the time he was 16. He had had this consciousness for 4 years, and it's like, I want to transition now. Was
there always a part in your head, though, that thought, this is a phase, he's going to grow out of this, and then back to quote-unquote normal?
Well, there was a little bit of that, but I think that's largely a delusion on the part of parents. I meet parents, and they're sad, they're melancholy, they're resisting it, but he is what he is. Like, if he's blue-eyed in a brown-eyed world, you can't say to him, you're not blue-eyed, you're brown-eyed, you're like me. I mean, I did have that phase where I almost was like talking him out of it, trying to talk him out of it. It's like, no, that's not really what you mean. I went through a short period like that, which was just foolish. It didn't make any sense. It didn't change him. It didn't change anything.
As his parent, of course, you want to do what's best for him.
Absolutely.
But you are also an individual. You are your individual self. And you had a daughter.
Yes.
How much do you miss that daughter?
A lot.
How do you deal with that?
Well, that's my problem. That's not his problem.
That's true, but...
it helps to write a book. I started writing about it, and I started sharing my writing with a few select people. And then I started to see it as maybe a how not to journal for parents, because I made mistakes and I didn't want them to make the same mistakes. Because I did mess up quite a bit.
Like what?
Well, the thing I mentioned was I tried to talk him out of it a little bit, and he wanted to change his name right away to a masculine-sounding name. And I said, can you please just make it more androgynous? So that was tough for him. I didn't tell people right away. There was a certain point where he was ready, he was confident. He's like, talk to people, tell the neighbors, tell the extended family, tell your coworkers. And I had to be like pushed into doing that. And I'd set these deadlines for myself. Okay, on December 1st, I will go and tell so-and-so, in phases. And I didn't handle certain things very well.
You've forgiven yourself for that by now, I presume.
Well, partially, but I mean, I think I talk about to other parents that I meet is like, just remember who's going through what. This is hard for you. It's harder for him or her. It's not fun for you. It's not fun for him either.
That's all true, but we shouldn't assume that Frankie is the only person going through something here, right? Everybody who knows Frankie is also going through something. Maybe not to the extent that he is, but something.
Steve, it's not the same. I mean, as much as I would like to garner sympathy or pats on the back for being whatever,
Mother
of the Year, which for me feels very phony knowing what we went through. I think your first priority has to be the emotional well-being of the child. Yeah. And if you do not permit them to transition, if you don't support them, I've seen what happens when kids are not supported. They don't do very well. They fall into that stereotype of the tragic transgender teen. And that's part of the reason why I wrote the book, because kids can thrive. They can do really well if you have a support system. If you don't have that system, yes, really bad things can happen to you.
Let me ask about that system, because I think it's tough enough for parents to be on the same page, you know, just dealing with the run-of-the-mill everyday challenges of being a parent. Now you got, you know, you have now had to experience a very dramatic episode in parenting, and I wonder if you and your husband were always able to stay on the same page in your approach to things.
No.
And how did you handle that?
At a certain point, my husband, Rob, sort of started adapting better than I did. To the point where Frankie and Rob were like, come on, Mom, get on board. Just, you know what? Just, it's happening. Like, I mean, several times I had to say, it's happening, Mom. Just get on board. So therapy helps.
Couples therapy?
Yeah. Yeah, talking about it, and because I think at one point we were both getting so stressed out, we were just getting really, you know, twitchy with each other, not respectful, not nice, you know. And for me, I felt like as the mom, I'm like, all of my energy was put towards keeping this kid in one piece, right? And I was getting a little ruthless about it. It's like I didn't care how anybody else felt, as long as I could get him through the day and get him the services that he needed and the emotional support that he needed. And I wasn't thinking about my husband. I wasn't thinking about Rob as the third person in this relationship, and not being nice. So I didn't want to continue on that way. I didn't want to be that kind of wife and mother.
Can we talk about how family handled all this? Any siblings? Frankie, have any siblings?
No, he's an only child.
Let's go further. Grandparents?
My mom has been fantastic. We only have one grandparent left. She's been really good. I think she's a little uneasy sometimes, but we're Italian. We're very tribal. We're very loyal. And once you're in the tribe, you're in the tribe. And that's it.
And we're calling your son Frankie. That's not, Frankie's not the real name.
No, it's a pseudonym.
And we're going with that because?
Well, I think when he wants to come out and be public about it, I'm going to leave it to him. Right now, everyone that needs to know that he's trans knows that he's trans. And people that don't know, I don't think they need that information.
There is a natural public curiosity about the physical changes that your child would have to undergo in order to transition from being a girl to being a boy.
Yes.
Do you talk about that?
I don't talk about it.
How come?
I don't think it's a polite question. And I think if you're not going to go next door to your neighbor and ask them intimate details about their children, then you shouldn't ask me intimate details about my child.
Seems fair enough. You, Michelle, I hasten to tell you, are not going to be the last parent in this world to experience what you have experienced, right?
Yes.
More to come.
Yes,
absolutely.
So
what's the best piece of advice you would give to other parents who may get that, Mom and Dad, I got to tell you something?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think you need to put your child first, regardless of your sense of confusion, possibly shame, disappointment, and forge ahead and try and support him or her. And even if that means going against your community or your church or your family, that's your job. That's your job as a parent, to take care of that kid. And if you're not taking care of him, you're not being a good parent. You're just not.
Are you proud of Frankie?
Absolutely. He's a great kid. A really great kid.
Who's been through more than most average kids.
Yeah, and my hope is that one day he's going to tell his story and his side of the story. Like right now, he's involved in working with other queer youth and helping them to come out. And I want him to talk about what he experienced and from his side of it.
If he writes a book, are you the kind of competitive mom who hopes his book won't sell more copies than yours?
I will be cheering for him the whole way.
I bet you will. The book is called The Unfinished Dollhouse, a memoir of gender and identity. Michelle Alfano, really good of you to visit us at TVO tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.